So you can't debate with the trans ideology. You destroy the trans ideology.
Exactly.
Because
you must crush it.
Evil.
Some of the wild racism that's cropped up, some of the Nazism or things like that. It's not a debate. Right. And what you'll see on the other side is people saying, we just want to ask questions. When people just want to ask questions, I just want to have a conversation. I just want the conversation. It's like, no, they don't.
No.
They're just looking to plant those mold spores in you. All they're trying to do is do what Weston is doing in Perelandra.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
We're back with an episode of SASF with a special guest and a special place.
Yeah, we're stealing my father's set.
Yep.
From No Quarter November.
Yeah, those of you who are aware,
of course,
know.
Set. This is Mr. Rogers' set.
Yeah. True. We're stealing Mr. Rogers' set.
Which Pastor
We
Wilson
did not
stole.
build this. This is the original, which we bought at auction.
Which we acquired.
Of course not.
Curtains and everything.
And you'll notice
as well.
that there's three of us here.
And our special guest today.
One of us looks very respectable. I'm in my hoodie. Brian,
I'm doing whatever.
Slightly better than a hoodie. And here we have a man of the cloth.
Yes. From England, nonetheless.
Welcome from England
to Father Calvin Robinson.
It's my pleasure.
It's great to have you on Stories of Soul Food.
Even though we kind of invited you here to squabble.
Okay. Let me get my cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, you have to tell us.
Hang on to that cup of tea. Hang on to it tight.
How bad the cup of tea really is.
It's not bad.
As an Idaho cup of tea, not bad? That'll pass.
He's a little gracious.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's
trying to disarm us, Brian.
Yeah, you can scale down.
So
Nate, are you going to start the combat?
Not really, but you are a fan of the Ransom Trilogy, the Space Trilogy, as am I.
Some of my favorite books.
Absolutely. Likewise, I think the only potential contention would be around that Hideous Strength.
Yes.
As you said on Twitter, your least favorite of the three. Whereas, just so we know where we are, it's my favorite novel in the English language.
Oh, wow.
So we're really close. Okay. We're really close together. But actually, I wanted to back up and ask you, prior to any kind of playful contention, just what you think the importance of story is, or how do you think we ought to be utilizing story now as believers in this moment in time?
Well, it's what Christ taught us, isn't it? That the best way to get a message across is through a story, an analogy, because it's how we hear it. We are emotive beings. It's why the woke lot keep winning arguments, because they are emotive in their arguments, and we try to reason with them with logic, and you just can't defeat that. And so, yeah, stories are important. C.S. Lewis's Narnia series reached an entire, generations of young people with the Christian message of salvation. And the Ransom series is about the fight between good and evil.
Which we are, of course, now part of. Only recently, not like we've been part of it our entire lives.
Right.
It is really interesting how often, and you're Anglican, so I mean, how would you describe yourself? So we do it right.
That's too much of a long question, but we'll go with Anglican. It works.
I mean, you're officially Anglican, yes?
Right. My orders are Old Catholic, but I serve in an Anglican church.
Okay, so you are a tool of Rome.
No. Old Catholicism is not Roman Catholicism.
Yes. I know. I'm joking.
We're just making sure every
our listeners, don't worry. Our listeners are used to us saying things that aren't true. Okay. So you are ministering. Yes. You have a flock. You're currently in Grand Rapids. Right. 20 years in London, and then now Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah.
Quite a change.
So basically an American at this point. Drinking tea.
Although I was drinking coffee this morning, drip coffee, the American way.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting how more academic and more intelligent branches of the church, and I don't mean this to be in any way insulting, I think that it's actually a weakness. Those portions of the church that tend to be better educated, a lot of the Reformed Church, portions of the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholic Church, there's different swaths and pockets of those communions where people read more, study more, they like abstractions, they think in terms of paradigms and logic. They really, really trust logic. And we have a tendency, I know I did growing up, we have a tendency to try to move people with logic and to move people with facts, data, and we can just kind of bounce syllogisms off of someone's forehead and then be confused why they're not being convinced.
Right.
But it's just not the way God made people to be moved.
Right.
So in terms of story, in your own life, what would be an example of a powerful story? Are there any novels or films in your own journey that were heavily influential or formative?
Oh gosh. There's a series called the Otherland series, which is not very well known, by a writer called Tad Williams, which speaks of...
I've read Tad.
Have you?
Yeah, the Dragonbone Chair.
Right.
Yeah,
So
series.
this is billionaires who want to live forever, and they essentially invent a multiverse, and they can download their consciousness into this multiverse, and it's about the battle of where's the ethics behind that. Yes, you can do something, but ought you do that thing? Should you do that thing? And what about the soul? If you download your consciousness into a computer, you live in the internet forever, where is your soul? What does it mean to be a human being if you're not a body and a soul? So where's the spirit? And that was a book that really challenged me. I think it was probably in my late teens I was reading that. That was a good read. But I see that everywhere. I see that in the times we're living in now.
It is everywhere right now.
This is probably what Elon Musk is going to do, or one of these great big billionaires is going to do. They're going to think, I don't want to die. I want to live forever, because they don't believe in a soul. So what are they going to do? They try to invent a way to do that.
Yeah, they're going to kill themselves trying to live forever.
Right.
And it is...
But also, on that, we are living through that very really with IVF. When we're creating these babies, like we create a dozen babies, maybe implant 2 of them, and the other 10 are frozen, never living but never dying. Like, what happens to the soul? What's going on with that process?
What's interesting there, this is not to fully run down this rabbit hole, but just to throw it out there are a lot of activists and protesters, especially helmed by IVF babies, children who were born via IVF or were frozen for a long time and have significant health issues, because it turns out that they were not ageless.
Right.
That entropy still holds even if you're frozen in a lab at a very young age. That the decay of everything, it's like time still passed and decay is still there and entropy is still there. Just being frozen didn't stop the process. And so they have premature, in scare quotes, issues and ailments and problems. But it is really interesting. A friend of mine, writer Walter Kern, who is very engaged as a podcaster and a journalist in a number of ways in this last election cycle, one of the things he said on repeat was that no one reads stories anymore, at least not enough of them. We're constantly barraged with stories and storytelling, but we aren't reading stories that were disciplined and constructed by very, very gifted people. And anyone with more of a familiarity with lit or story could have read the whole election cycle without any difficulty. And you could see which side's doing what, and the physics of story and how God made the world. It's just going to play out a certain way. It's going to go in certain patterns. And so he was talking about all the surprise, all the shock that people were experiencing from the election is because they don't know how to read a story. And they were not thinking as if they were reading a story.
Right.
They didn't realize this is a story, and they weren't processing it like a story. And even if they had, they wouldn't know how to read it. But what you're just describing, having read this early transhumanist, novel, you look around and you're reading the story around you in terms of a narrative that you read as a teenager. You said, so you can't help but see Musk a certain way. Right. And we talked a little bit about this before we were recording, but where do you see Musk going as a character?
Unrestrained, that concerns me. But if he finds the faith and he has good people around him to hold him accountable in great places, but it's a big if. If he is just let loose with his billions of dollars and government sanctions and the okay to get on with it, that's a very big concern, because a lot of people on our side look to him as a hero, and some people potentially idolize him. Yeah, and
he's been heroic.
Yeah,
like he just did something heroic.
Yeah, because he aligns with us on certain things, but he's not one of us. He's not with us, and that's what concerns me. I hope that he finds faith in Jesus Christ.
I mean, his desire to perhaps go for as much mixture of humanity and machine as possible, just because we can try it. We've talk a fair amount about sci-fi, and that's a sci-fi setup.
Well, this is what I was saying to
for
Nate,
a novel.
This is the hideous strength, or out of the silent planet. Like, he wants to go to Mars.
Yeah,
he could be the Western character, right? Or he could be building the institution.
Right.
And we're all like, yeah, this is great. Science,
Yeah.
fantastic. But science without ethics is dead.
And he's a child of sci-fi.
Yeah.
Elon Musk was fed stories and read stories and those watched stories, and those stories have affected his imagination,
Right.
his ideals, what he sees as a goal, something that would be very heroic to achieve. He is aiming for particular things, not in a narrative vacuum. He was catechized with narrative. He was catechized with particular types of narrative.
Right.
And you can see that come out in his desires and his judgments. We can laugh about the Cybertruck, you know, and other things, but it's his desire to go to Mars. And he's a contrarian. He wants to offend certain sensibilities. He wants to, you know, lean against some things. And he's a joy to have around, and I'm very grateful for him. But if he's untethered from any kind of like meta narrative that is actually true, he doesn't have an ideology, doesn't have a paradigm that is anchors him in truth, goodness, and beauty.
Yeah.
Then what will he do is whatever he feels like doing next.
That's the thing.
And he's a flawed man.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me that we currently are using stories like we're using grenades. You know, it's like we just throw Margaret Atwood at each other. It's like a Handmaid's Tale, and they think that's the explosion. You know, that's what it is. But with Musk, it's interesting to me that he's, I think, one of the top 20 Diablo 4 players in the world. Yeah. That's, you're watching what he likes to do, and it makes sense to me.
Well, it tracks because he can recognize evil. Like he sees wokeness, he sees that the mind virus, as he calls it, he sees that as evil, but he doesn't yet recognize good. So you can fight against evil, but you need to fight for good. Otherwise, it's a dead fight.
You had a background in video games, did you know?
Yeah, I did.
How long were you working in video games?
A while, but I've played them. I did play them for a long time too. I have a website called godisageek.com, which is a video game reviews website. I'm not involved in it anymore, but it's still out there. And they still review video games every year.
Where do you slot video games as narratives?
I think it's over-egged. So there are a few video games that are really good stories. I can think of a few like The Last of Us. There are a handful. The Walking Dead. But generally speaking, it's action.
Yeah. So what I mean is a game that's popular, just a game, and it's not a 3-act structure. It's not narrative. It's just and then.
Right.
You're just dealing with the next alien. What does that do?
Well, it's just dopamine hits, isn't it? It's just, see, men are created to work. We know this from Genesis. And through that, we have this sense of achievement when we have worked. And so we're created to produce things. We're created to create, right? And in the world, we used to build with our hands. And now we don't necessarily do that. So we have to get that from somewhere. So we get that from video games. We dial in, get dopamine hits, and then we're like, yeah, that was a success. And then but it's not good. It's not true.
It's just the hit. It's just the chemical.
It is.
It's a bit faux, I guess.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, have you seen, I guess, as far as the imagination of kids in England, as far as we talk regularly about how the England topsoil feels like it's full of fantasy. Like it is the storytelling topsoil that I grew up on, reading all those stories, consuming them. Yeah. Has that changed a lot recently? Or do you feel like there's still an understanding of that literary heritage, or is it being totally lost?
No, I don't think it's lost. I think if you look at games like Minecraft, it's basically Lego, and the kids are creating their own universes, and they're using their imaginations. There's definitely, the imagination is still there, but it is the superficial element that worries me. I'm not anti-video games, but the same with the gym. Like, men go to the gym and feel like they've worked out, but it's superficial. It's not really building anything. It's not really using your body. But we feel like we have to find that achievement somehow.
The gym often is a glorified prison cell. You know, in terms of like you're confined and you went and you exerted yourself. You did exertions to get your body to a certain place. To do what?
Right, indeed.
Were you training for a thing? Great. You know, like when a football player, when an athlete is in the gym, it's all preparation for moments in time, like of performance. Yeah. What is it for the guy who's just posted on Instagram? What is it for the guy who just wants to feel better about himself? And I'm not trying to.
But that is our job, though, to be as strong as we physically can be, to be as dangerous as we possibly can be as men, to restrain that strength, and that's what makes a gentleman. But
which is very Peterson, right?
It is very Peterson, but it's again, it's all superficial the way we're doing it.
Yeah, and of course, then if you're doing it correctly, if you're there training, it's because there might be a game.
Right.
You're standing ready, basically. Okay.
We should always be ready.
So transitioning to the Space Trilogy.
Right.
I want to just give you some room, give you some space to walk through all 3 books.
Okay.
Out of the Silent Planet, Perelandra, and That Hideous Strength. Strengths, weaknesses, and why you give That Hideous Strength the bronze medal of the 3.
Okay, I'll start with the gold. So Perelandra.
I would assume. Yeah.
Why would you assume that?
It's the most abstract.
Okay. He's making judgments over here.
Yes.
Because it shows us the difference between good and evil and how to fight it. My favorite scene is on the beach with the possessed Western.
Yep.
And Ransom is arguing with him and trying to use reason and logic constantly and remembering.
Not working.
Right, because the devil never sleeps, but he has to, he gets tired. And you cannot persuade someone into truth. Right? Reason is important. Reason and logic are important and they're good because they guide us on the path, but they cannot persuade us. And so he's going on and on and on and on, fighting against this devil. And then God keeps saying, enough is enough. And he continues fighting, and God says, enough is enough. Then on a third time, God just says, enough. And he realizes what he needs to do. He needs to just end it. He needs to just end the devil.
He needs to smash his head with a rock.
He does need to smash his head with a rock,
And he does, which is it's my favorite scene as well.
Is it really?
It's a fantastic sequence. And there's an enormous amount of wisdom there where I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, when I've talked to somebody who's struggling to communicate to a person who's hurting, who's rebelling, who's embracing folly, and I'm giving them the most valid syllogisms.
Right.
I have all the syllogisms. Does nothing. No.
I think Nate's told me several times as I've been like, I can't get the reason of why this person is doing this very stupid thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll say, stop.
There's not a reason.
There's not a reason.
There's a narratival cause. So this person is a character in a story, and there is a cause.
Right.
Like there's something behind there emotionally, historically, in terms of their own prejudices, their catechisms of their youth, things they experienced, their loves, their loyalties, their hates, their disloyalties, all of which were influenced by the stories they read and watched. And then the narrative of their own life, and they've reacted into something. And when you are foolish enough to ask a person why they're doing it, and they give you the reason. This is what happens to Ransom in Perelandra. Right. You're asking for the devil's reasons, not his causes.
Well, you're trying to compete with him. You're not
exactly,
really
but he's giving Weston's giving reasons. The unman is reasoning, right? He's happy to reason all day, and he's giving reasons, and Ransom just sits there fighting them. And then he's fighting the twigs and leaves of a tree and never getting to the trunk.
Yeah, the original fall is caused by reason. You know, did God really say that? Don't you want to know? Don't you want to be like him? Like those are all reasons.
And not all ideas are equal. This is an important part. People keep saying, you know, if you're nice enough with this, they'll come around eventually. No, they won't come around eventually. But also their idea isn't an equal idea to this idea. Christianity is true, objectively true. And therefore that idea is evil and needs to be smashed on the head with a rock.
Yep. And so what you have in that sequence in Perelandra, which is, there's many, many wonderful scenes in Perelandra, but it's one of the most striking and most profound, that it appears that Lewis has set up a dialogue, and he has. He's set up something that's fairly formulaic. There's a jury in the woman, in the green woman, and there's these debate partners, these two debate partners.
Yes.
And then he reaches a point where he says, gotcha, fooled you. It was never a debate.
Yeah, exactly.
You were always here to kill it.
Yeah.
And so if the devil were tempting Eve, if the devil is tempting one of your children, if you have somebody in your life who's being tempted, sometimes handing them reason is helpful.
So you can't debate with the trans ideology. You destroy the trans ideology.
Exactly.
Because
you must crush it.
Evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is incidentally something I've said about some of the wild racism that's cropped up, you know, some of the Nazism or things like that. It's not a debate. Right. And what you'll see on the other side is people saying, we just want to ask questions. We just want to dialogue. It's like, well, but you're not in that position, honestly, by good faith, because you just happen to have an intellectual question. intellectual questions, don't work this way. In a classroom, if somebody's curious about something, they're saying, "Hey, what is the GDP of France?" Like, okay, I'm just curious. We can check, and there's no friction or tempest. There's no big conflict. When people just want to ask questions, I just want to have a conversation. I just want the conversation. It's like, no, they don't.
No.
They're just looking to plant those mold spores in you. All they're trying to do is do what Weston is doing in Perelandra.
So one of the most popular debates that I had online so far is one where I sat down and I was expecting a certain debate and it turned out to be a different debate. So I was on television, I was sat next to someone who I see as taking part in this evil culture. Like he loves it, but he doesn't see that it's evil. And one of the things I said was, if I had known I was debating him, I would not have turned up, because you can't debate evil. And he was like, "How dare you call me?" Went off. But I wasn't necessarily saying he's evil, but his ideology is evil.
No, it was an abstraction.
Right.
Where I would just say, sure, he was evil too.
Well, we all have.
Yes, I get it. Carry on. Sorry. Yes.
But that, of course, that went viral because everyone's like, you have to be reasonable. You have to debate with these. And I'm like, no, I won't debate with him, and I won't debate on that topic with him.
Yeah. I will utter condemnations of this. I will proclaim damnations on this ideology, but I do not need to step into a courtroom as if we're on equal footing and have a debate.
So applying to the trans question, you're saying there is no parent who is talking about, do I trans my kid or not, who has a good faith discussion that we need to have with them.
That's different. So the thing is, then you're moving into the person who is deceived, who has been deceived. So that person could be in the position of the Green Lady in Perelandra. The ideology and the trans ideology, the woke mind virus, as Elon calls it, must be crushed.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It just must be crushed. And then it can no longer tempt and confuse and deceive. Like, it just has to be eliminated. It has to be crushed. And
so moving that to the kid then, the kid who thinks I don't fit.
Well, they might be deceived too.
Gotcha.
Like, where are they getting it from? We've got to find the deceivers.
And those are the ones that you don't need to worry about.
It's the therapist that says, the reason you're unhappy is because you're stuck in the wrong body. If we take these drugs, you'll feel happy again.
Yep. Exactly.
Right.
And ultimately, it happens over and over and over again, where some guy is artistic, and so some grooming adult is planting seeds of lies, deceptions, like, maybe you're gay, you're very sensitive, you might just be a genius. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be sexual. You have a daughter or some young girl who's actually just historically would have been known as a tomboy. She likes sports and the outdoors and horses and so on, and then some liar from outside has to come in and create all that confusion. And so the question is, do we just welcome them into conversation and say, well, it's on equal footing, neutrality, right? We're going to have a neutral discussion in this secular space. It's just not possible. It is not possible. So
it feels like, too, that comes back around to our idea of story providing perspective, that it's broader than what you're told, because it feels like everybody who is trying to fit into a particular idea of happiness that's wrong, is where you get those kids saying, I don't fit in whatever this particular story is that's being told. This is my way toward happiness. Well, and if you just read more stories, you'd understand how big
we do
life
get
is.
This is so we're talking about in Perelandra, it's crush the guy's head with a rock in a cave. It's like, you're going to go do this. If you're talking about things like the trans ideology, it's mockery, it's derision, it's condemnations. It's just, what we're not going to do is say, hey, bring us your best arguments, and then we'll engage, and let's find a neutral judge who could tell us who won the debate. It's like, no, it's not a thing to be handled that way. But it just can't be.
To your point, I think that's the Disney story that people have been told, happily ever after, or the American dream, to the pursuit of happiness. That's not a Christian idea. Happiness is a temporary feeling, it's an emotion, it's not a place you can exist. And so if you're constantly chasing that, it's like chasing the dragon. It's like being a drug addict, because you can never actually achieve it. It's a false promise. Whereas the Christian message is that actually we find contentment, we find fulfillment, we find reward in living lives in Christ. We may not even be happy. We may be suffering, but we've got to try and find the joy in that suffering.
Yeah.
There's a few other wonderful little touches in Perelandra, quite a few. There's a beautiful scene about the bubble bath You have
we
the
talked
big,
about that before.
Yeah, you have the big drop of water, and you touch. It's like it immerses you, and you have this experience. And it wouldn't be good if you just did it again and again and again.
Yeah.
These little touches. One of the signs of Lewis's genius in Perelandra is the fundamental pettiness of evil. That evil is ultimately childish and petty.
It's the kind of thing that rips a frog apart.
Yeah. So Weston is putting his fingernail on the back of a frog and just peeling its skin back and leaving it alive. That kind of stuff. So Lewis is exploring not the grandeur of evil like Milton does mistakenly in Paradise Lost. So Paradise Lost, you have Satan is awfully compelling. He's this melodramatic, interesting character. And Lewis, who, of course, admired Milton greatly, does something very different in Perelandra and takes this evil down to pettiness. He, of course, builds on that in the superior book, that Hideous Strength. But
Fairy Hardcastle with the cigarette burns. It's not evil with its swarming
it's
minions.
also wither blathering.
Yeah.
It's word salads and meaninglessness. It's petty and stupid and childish, and you can't treat it like a grown-up. You can't have this exchange of ideas at all. So in Perelandra, which is a beautiful book and one very, very worth reading, it would be very difficult to ever make as a film because of all the nakedness.
But you could have the body parts pixelated. Like, you have to know that they're naked, but you don't have to see that they're naked.
It could theoretically be done.
Yeah.
It's possible for it to be done, but it would be hard.
It would be hard to capture the beauty, the essence of the beauty.
Yeah, it would be very difficult. So then book number 2 for you is Out of the Silent Planet. And why is that?
I think it's just because Perelandra trumped it. I loved the setup of it. I loved the environments. It was very English. Having studied in Oxford, it's very reminiscent of that kind of an England that has never really existed, but it exists up here. Like it's the Harry Potter world, right? It's not quite Oxford, and so I think that's part of the beauty of the English heritage. We reminisce about something that never really existed.
It's an aspirational, nostalgic.
Yes.
You're saying the Silent Planet is?
Yeah.
The world itself with the Fiffletriggy and the Zorns and the countryside, or
from where he originated before he went
in the Oxfordian setup.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is, of course, delivered even more potently in that Hideous Strength. But
but then on Mars, it was like multiculturalism doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has, and it actually points back to feudalism. Everyone having a place, being part of a greater design. And knowing your place, and that's not an oppressive to know your place. That's how do I contribute to society? How do I be part of a community? This is what I was made for. It's vocational, like having the different species and the different roles all coming together to make the world beautiful. That's a good thing. That's what we all used to have, and now we have this social mobility of everyone wanting to be middle class, everyone wanting to strive to be better, and everyone's competing with each other, but no one's looking out for each other. No, there's no noblesse oblige anymore. I have a duty and obligation to look after the workers on my estate. It's if everything's locked down, I don't pay my cleaner anymore because she's not coming round. Instead, it should be I have to save the money that I would have been paying my cleaner, so when she comes back, she can still take care of herself. Like, we've lost all of that because we no longer have a place in society. We're making it up as we go along.
So, Out of the Silent Planet, for you really enjoyed it, but it's just not as good as Perelandra.
Right.
And so that's why it's number 2.
Yeah.
So then we reach last place. The failure.
I mean, it wasn't failure, but the first half of the book was so slow-paced and so dull. Like, there were so many characters, and it was overly complicated before it didn't get to the point. It took way too long to get to the point. It was only after Merlin woke up that things started to get interesting.
Spoken like a true gamer.
He had to respawn.
Yeah, he had to respawn.
But the battle between good and evil didn't begin until that point. And
it actually does.
Go on then.
But he does it in kind of reverse order in that Hideous Strength, where evil's already there in Mark and Jane's marriage.
Yep.
Evil has already crept into Jane. She's already deceived.
But it was all ordinary. It was all everything we see every day.
So
it was just
in Perelandra, we get to the petty, ordinary.
right.
We get to the petty ordinariness of evil.
Yeah.
The petulance of evil, really. we arrive there having already gone on this grand escape, a grand voyage.
Yes.
You know, we're off on Venus or we're on Mars.
Yeah.
We've done this big thing, and then he surprises us by showing us the insignificant doldrums of evil.
But I could just walk outside and see that.
Yeah, true. But the thing that I really like in Mark and Jane and that dynamic early is that what their both experience is very universal. It's a very universal evil. You know, it's the decay, it's the rot of normal domesticity.
The ordinary crashing and burning.
Yeah, and so yes, you can walk outside and see that everywhere, which is why this is a book for everyone. Because this kind of evil, that we haven't been in a place where the devil is peeling the backs off of frogs. We have been here, and every human knows people who are here now and has been tempted to be here. Just the decay of discontentment, the decay and the pain and the boredom that comes from a betrayal of the hierarchies of nature. And so what you were describing in terms of the hierarchies of Out of the Silent Planet shows up in an absence at the beginning of that Hideous Strength. Jane and Mark have not embraced their hierarchical roles in nature, in the natural world. So you're right, in terms of it coming out the gates slow, it does. That's like guilty. It comes out slowly. And I think it could accelerate.
I think we've criticized it in previous as like, that's a long 80 pages.
Yeah.
But also you get to see Lewis' mastery of an actual character where you don't get much adult literary fiction from Lewis.
Yeah.
You can see him really nail it.
It really is. And the thing that's interesting is I accept Tolkien's criticism of that Hideous Strength as it's not from the same series.
Right.
That Hideous Strength is written after the influence of Charles Williams. It's written in a much more earthy and literary and slow-boiled character way, as opposed to we're getting knocked out and thrown in a spaceship and taken to Mars right away.
And half your body's sunburned and half of it isn't. You know, that
as opposed to I'm in a foreign world, naked with the devil and a new Eve.
So it's not fantastical.
Yeah. And so it starts in this very real place and sells the reality of it very convincingly. I could name a number of Janes, right now who are struggling with contentment in their role, not understanding the freedom, the joy that comes from being who they are meant to be. Not chasing their dreams like a Disney princess, but being who God meant them to be and really trying to excel in that.
Yeah.
But then Mark's insecurities and his vulnerability to the inner ring and to exclusion and to manipulation, the manipulation of the cool and peer pressure is also very interesting. His wisdom and insights into the decay of institutions, into bureaucracy, into marriage, and honestly, him dropping the veil on this aspirational nostalgia of Oxford and showing this petty little bickering thing that is a college, like in Oxford. He starts there and spends a long time there, and no, it's not riveting. It is not a quick out the gates fantastical adventure that has an inciting incident really quickly and gets moving. And so it's different. It is very different than the rest of the series. But a lot of the wisdom that shows up in Lewis's in his sermons and his radio addresses in God in the Dock is all here incarnate. So things that he said argumentatively, things that he said logically, the cases that he made elsewhere, he enfleshed here.
Yeah.
And then you're right, then we get to Merlin and it turns back into one of those stories. So the first 80 pages is slow. It just is slow, but I think it's rich and it's wise and slow. And then we are off to the races when we have the homeless man and Merlin, and it's farcical and funny.
But it ended again with Mark kind of realizing his mistakes and going in to meet his wife after all of this they've been through. And I was like, I wasn't even rooting for him. I find him a dull character. I wanted to know what's happening with Ransom, what's happening with the Pendragon, like what happened to the war, what does Oxford look like now? Oh, not Edgbaston.
You didn't like Mark?
I didn't not like him. I just didn't. They hadn't built any. I wasn't empathetic towards him.
I'll say this. I would love more Ransom.
Yeah.
No, that's not. I don't think it's criticism of that Hideous Strength so much as just a good thing ending, and not getting as much of it.
But it's a Ransom trilogy, and Ransom was barely in it.
You might notice I call it the Space Trilogy. The space was barely in it, and then that Hideous Strength too. But it came down. The heavens come down in that Hideous Strength. I actually think that the scene with Ransom and Jane, when she meets the director and experiences the gravitas of a man who has been in the heavens, like a true man, a man who's already
Ordered.
Yeah, it's very like post-resurrection man,
Yeah.
and the mice cleaning up the crumbs and everything else, and him having to rebuke her for just how subservient she immediately wants to be.
That stuff was good. And the relationship with the animals, that like pre-fall or post-fall relationship with the animals, all that was great. The stuff that he brought back from Perelandra was great. But I wanted to know...
You just wanted more of
the
Ransom.
heavenly war, the war between good and evil, the war between Britannia and Logos. I wanted to know where's that going? But it's all about the marriage of Mark and Jane. And actually, I wasn't invested in their marriage.
So what's funny is I understand the criticism. I think it is very much a taste-driven criticism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's fair enough. It's like, okay, you like chocolate cake. He's not baking a chocolate cake. It's different.
Right. So I read 2 science fiction books that were fantasy books. And then the third one is an allegory on marriage.
What's funny is actually, given that you're somebody who loves abstractions and is drawn to allegory, the first 2 are far more allegorical, and the third is earthy and it's real. The first 2 are flights of fancy.
Yes.
Big, grand flights of fancy.
Right.
And
Which is
this
what fiction
one
should
is
be.
This one is a woman who's struggling to finish her dissertation, and her husband, who is insecure and easily manipulated, getting swept into this Merlin adventure.
I've lived in Oxford. I've met Mark and Jane.
Yeah.
I don't want to read about them when I'm trying to escape in some fiction.
That's funny. Maybe that's what it is. Because man, by the time they bring in Mr. Boltitude and the head is percolating behind the scene, and we get the bear getting the head. I mean, I feel like that
the Curse of
climax
Babel,
is incredible.
etc. I mean, I love Ransom. So all the scenes with Ransom, I would take anything Lewis wrote about Ransom and really enjoy it. But he has arrived as a character, and so he is in this like post-resurrection state.
He has no more need. He just desire.
He does not have a character arc to pursue, and so there is not all of his action would be external to him and not his growth from his flaws, which he had in Perelandra. He doesn't have the journey of his flaws into a messianic character like he is in Perelandra, where he bruises his heel and he really is a picture of Christ. And so he's this faithful servant, the Pendragon. Yeah. But in terms of a character for a story, he doesn't have it. He just doesn't have the arc there. I actually, the way I've thought about these books in terms of film is I've always thought about making that Hideous Strength first as a standalone. And of course, in adaptation, you can't do those 80 pages. In a film version, it has to be.
Yeah, that'd be one chapter.
It has to move much faster. Yeah. And then backfill into prequels, which I think would be much easier to adapt, at least on the page. Yeah. Because they're already so tight and small and condensed.
Well, it was nice. The Merlin in the cassock speaking Latin. It was like being back at St. Stephen's house, honestly.
I really I enjoy your disdain of like, I've been here. I've already been with the company at St. Anne's. This is terribly uninteresting to me. I know these boring British people with bad marriages.
I do.
I don't want to know them anymore.
I'm not their pastor.
Yeah, you're not there. My grandfather, famously inside of our family, said he couldn't watch movies. He hated watching movies because he always just wanted to go up on screen and tell everybody to knock it off and start counseling people. Like the whole plot is always built on people being idiots, and he wanted to make it go away. I think that your distaste, shall we say, for that Hideous Strength, I understand it. I like it's coming from. I think it's very personal. It's very located in you, but you don't have to like carrot cake.
No.
Yeah, it's like
I do like carrot cake though.
Okay, well, we can pick one you don't, but you don't have to, right?
It's like
it's
you can appreciate a well-made cake.
Yeah.
Without
so
liking
this is I hate bananas. I just can't stand a banana. I ate way too many when I was young, and I can't stand bananas. I do not think that bananas are objectively bad.
Right.
I just can't do it. It's not there for me. It's not as compelling.
I didn't say it was a bad book. I said it's my favorite.
Exactly. We're pushing you into hypercriticism.
Yeah, it's
but
only
we're trying
interesting.
to.
It's only interesting if we make you say that one of Lewis's works is not good.
Right.
Yes.
Which I have never said.
Yeah, which you did not say.
I'd like to see actually.
It's your least favorite.
I'd like to see a movie adaptation of The Great Divorce. Could you see that happening?
Yes, I have written it, and it is happening.
Okay, good.
So
Right.
that's I would let you read a script, and
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can let me know. So yeah, it's marching forward. It's been a very long, slow journey, but
It's been almost 80 pages, I think.
Really?
Of
Yeah.
you marching forward.
it's been 9 years actually. It's been 9 years of wrangling, and trying to get it to go forward. So yeah, I have.
Is it moving again? I think we've hinted at it before.
No, it's
moving. Wow.
It's
okay.
alive. So
Is that an exclusive?
yeah, it's alive, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But it's difficult
Yes.
to say the least.
Here's an interesting question. Do you think Great Divorce comes down from that hyperbolic plane, or I guess the allegorical plane, and gets real in the same way that Perelandra does? Because what I'm wondering is we've got the Plato dialogues. It does feel that the story of Socrates also has to become real. Like he dies at the end. It's almost as if the dialogue doesn't quite embody it enough, and it must become real. And I'm wondering, does the Great Divorce, obviously it's very allegorical all the way through, but do we have that same moment of touchdown where we've got allegory becoming reality, and all of a sudden the character, that's what I find really interesting about Perelandra, is that move from we thought we were in a Plato dialogue, and all of a sudden you're actually afraid, and you feel the idea of human teeth biting your heel is awful.
Yep.
And then you know, when we get to that hideous strength and he's still suffering from that bite wound, so I guess that's a question for you guys.
Yeah, I think so. I think when the angel's talking to the man and he's still got the devil on his shoulder and he's saying, I can't let this devil go. I need this. And the angel says, let me help you with that.
The angel says over and over and over again, can I kill it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he starts giving all these reasons, like, well, the thing is, it's difficult,
Right.
and the response is, can I kill it?
Yeah.
There's nothing but can I kill it? And it's
That's so real.
yeah, and there's no arguments of like, well, the thing about lust
Right.
is actually, let me tell you how it's bad for you and how
Right.
it's harming your mental processes. It's like, no, it's just, I'm going to kill it now. And then
The
eventually,
character voice then is where we see the reality of those people.
yeah,
And it could be any sin, and it's everybody. We all have that one thing. We're like, wait, yeah, but this is my inner self. This is my true self. This is,
yeah. Yeah, the thing you let go of slowly. I think the adaptation of The Great Divorce is obviously it was written episodically in a magazine. His worldview, his paradigm is all intact. Everything's there. The thought experiment is there and intact and coherent, but there's not a through plot. And the thing that's interesting about it is that it's like clothing. It's like these different articles of clothes, and you have to come up with a mannequin that you could actually put them all on. And so the adaptation process was, how do we create a story that's not here, but that is true to Lewis and true to the imagination of Lewis, that enables the maximum number of these scenes and these moments to exist in one coherent place. And it was a really fun, very fun task, and hopefully comes to life beautifully. But it's not over. My dream would be for The Great Divorce to exist as a feature film and also as a series. So, and a series would be more episodic than serialized in terms of following the individual characters. These incredibly rich characters could each have their own episode.
Yeah.
That you could really explore them and what they have going on. But anyway, The Great Divorce is stunning, and it's genius. And you see all the same thinking and the same processes, his thought processes showing up in the Space Trilogy. Like he's just one very, very consistent, coherent guy who has a very rich worldview and ideology, and everything he talks about and everything he writes is part of one unified whole. Yeah. And so you don't find a lot of disparity. You can, but you don't find a lot of contradictions or disparity in his thought going from one book to another book, unless you span decades and you have a very immature believer and you have a more mature believer. Then you find some more. But the Space Trilogy is a favorite. The Great Divorce is way up there. Screwtape would be simple, would be magnificent. And
I haven't seen the theatre production of that yet, but I'd like to. I think it is a genius. It's just an inversion, isn't it? It's rather than this is what we do. It's like, well, this is how we'll get them.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting about Screwtape is working with an anti-hero, and we've talked about this. We were just picking on Shrek and some other stories. It's very easy for modern storytellers to say, let's turn it upside down. Let's make the good guy bad. Let's make the bad guy good. And let's work with an anti-hero, but to work from the devil's perspective and your affectionate uncle, and to only see it from the devil's perspective and still be rooting for the character who's off screen the entire time that you never knew is very interesting.
Well, it's because we are the character off screen, so we have that empathy straight away.
But he does an amazing job of revealing these demonic thought processes in a way that is not making you recoil from that character, because he's writing it from this perspective. And so you're journeying along this demonic, route without ever sympathizing with that demonic route and entirely sympathizing with this off-screen person who is you. But
I think it's what you both have touched on earlier about the making of evil real.
Yeah,
we talk about that a lot with villains. They can't be fake.
Right.
They have to be realistic, and it's hard to make a devil realistic in that way. And it does feel like that perspective shift allowed it to happen.
This is really enjoyable. I really, as a matter of taste, I understand your perspective on that Hideous Strength. It remains my favorite novel in the English language.
Wow.
Because I don't know those British people.
Right. You should go and spend some time in
I only know Mark and Jane. And
I'll introduce you to them next time.
Yes, it's okay. I know them already. I've already read the story. And of course, Ransom is magnificent. And it's hard to argue with somebody who says, I would like more Ransom. Sure. I
That
too.
speaks to good taste. To want more
I
Ransom.
too would like more Ransom.
We're in agreement.
Well, yeah, exactly. But, even good things like whiskey, you should have in small doses. Ransom's a little bit like that.
All good things in moderation.
Yeah, he's a fantastic Scotch. And just...
I'm glad you said Scotch and not bourbon. That's very good.
Yeah. Well, Scotch actually is a far more complex drink, and there's a lot more to it. Not to knock bourbon, which I very much enjoy. Well, thank you so much.
You.
Yeah.
We didn't really fight, but it was a very interesting conversation. I appreciate it.
Like Scotch, this small sample of Stories of Soul Food is now over.
Yeah, we're done. We're done.
Some people prefer to be cremated instead of buried, but Granddad wanted to be buried.
You are dying. So am I. Every second I create more of my past, more decisions, more breathing, more love and more loathing. All of it slides by into the gone as I grab at more moments, at memories just made and already fading. We are all authors, creators of our pasts, authors of the books that will be our lives. When we race across the wet concrete of time without purpose, without laughter and love and sacrifice, then we fail in our mortal moments. See the past, see your life as the fruit of providence and thousands of personal narratives. What led to you? Lighthearted tales of neighborhood love, great tales of migrations, epic tales of global wars and comedies, dark stories about brothers and murder, tales of rape and grief and persecution. You did not choose where to set your feet in time. You choose where to set them next. Pause, breathe, eyes front. See the future. Do not stare into the fog of distant years. See the crystal choices as they race towards you in this sharp foreground we call now. The future flies at you in a never-ending storm of possibilities. God says create. God says live. Choose. Shape the past. Etch your lives in stone, and what you make will be forever. You are dying. So am I. We march from page to page, and it is our living that takes us toward the end. Children will follow. reading our stories, built on our stories, set in a place and in a time that we helped choose for them. They will be the ones to shut the book behind us. They will dig holes and arrange flowers. They will fill out forms. Cause of death, life. May it be the truth.
What's the point of the whole Bible?
Kill